Oh, would you like to swing on a star or carry moonbeams home in a jar? But you'd be better off than you are. Or would you rather be a mule? Although I was born in Joliet, Illinois and grew up in Plainfield, the circumstances and locations of my adoption show that the very high strangeness began occurring from the very start. I know the story of my inception because in 1999, at the age of 29, I met my birth mother. And about 4 months ago, at the age of 51, I met my birth father for the first time and pulled together some of the deepest weird shit. Key to this story is that my inception begins in Colorado Springs, Colorado, a location and a state that have made freedom a very real thing in modern times. Colorado Springs is significant to the larger story because it is also the birthplace of the Libertarian Party in December of 1971. The party has a stated goal of a world set free in our lifetime. And if you followed my work, you know that freeing the world is way, way up at the tippy top of things that I hope to accomplish this century. So, Joe, it doesn't look like we're going to win.
So what are we going to do, Bob?
We're going to do the same thing we do every day, Joe. Plan to take over the world and leave people alone. Growing up, I had no information about my biological parents, and so it's easy to pin my desire to enter the U.S. Air Force on the space race at the time. My mom even let me stay home to watch the first shuttle launch, and so my desire to enter the Air Force is perhaps well established there. But in the spring of 1969, it turned out that my father was actually in the Air Force and training to be a crew chief on B-52 bombers, B-52Hs actually. And that's shocking to find out because when I entered the Air Force, which I seemed to want to do my whole life, I was eventually also a crew chief on B-52 bombers. I worked on B-52G, which means that my father worked on a newer model of the B-52 than I did 20 years before. So the story goes, there were 7 airmen who seemed to be trapped in a training pattern at the base as they watched one group of recruits come in after another to train and then deploy overseas to the Vietnam War. One of the 7 began making noise about his deployment, and it was discovered that the Air Force had literally lost these 7 airmen. Now, that would be corrected shortly thereafter, and my father would leave for Phan Rang Air Base in Vietnam. Shortly before leaving, my father would get my mother pregnant and leave on his deployment before anyone knew Bobby was on his way. My mom was dating another guy from the Army when she found out that she was pregnant, and although he was not the father, he married her and he sent her back to Mom and Dad in Plainfield, Illinois, 900 miles away as the crow flies. What I didn't know until recently was that my father and his family were from Green Bay, Wisconsin, a location that will come into focus over and over and over. Focus on this for now. Both my father's family and eventually my father, once he returned from Vietnam, lived in Green Bay while I was growing up. We both lived within the 88th line of longitude. And by both, I mean my paternal family and my adopted family. I was born at St. Joe's Hospital in Joliet, Illinois on December 5th, 1969. This is my natal chart, which is the planetary alignments at my birth. I was brought home to my adoptive parents, who lived next door to the lawyer that handled my adoption and who happened to originally be from Connecticut. Shortly after the birth and giving me up for adoption, my mom needed some women's help and wandered into the local pharmacy. The pharmacist of the shop had gone blind some 15 years before, and his wife had a provisional license to run the family business. That wife was my grandmother. Neither the lawyer nor my grandmother ever gave up their secret. My family would eventually get a cabin at the tip of Door County, Wisconsin in 1975. And so I literally lived directly south of my father and drove within 30 miles of him for 13 summers. And I did all of this, once again, from my inception in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'll return to Colorado Springs when I talk about my run for governor in Wisconsin in 2014 at a later date. You could say it's only a 1 in 50 chance that I would run for governor in the same state as my father and family, but then again, very few people have ever run for office, much less governor of a state. Like anyone, I simply accepted my reality at birth, and I had no idea that any of these synchronicities existed until 4 months ago. But given the story I began to unfold years before, it just sort of clicked. The strangeness continued when I first met my father a few months ago. When I was pulling up to the restaurant to meet him, the clock on the bank in front of me read 11:11, and the temperature was 74. There was a coin involved in this story, but I'll tell you about that coin in another video. Being adopted and meeting your parents much later in life is a perspective and a gift that is hard to beat. It has much resonance with reincarnation in that just as I had other parents in this life, I had other parents in my last life. I can see very amazing traits which I inherited from my biological parents, and I can see very amazing traits that I gained from my adopted parents. There are traits in my life that also tie to my past life and to my past parents. The Libertarian Party has a goal of setting the world free in our lifetime. It's a beautiful goal, and it comes from my hometown of Colorado Springs, Colorado. And someday, I'm going to ask you to help me spread hope like fire. And when I do, you'll know it's the right thing to do at the right time, because freedom will be about to happen in our lifetime. If you are not sufficiently impressed by this story so far, you should check out who the mascot of UW Green Bay is. My shit's been weird, brah. Really, really weird. And it keeps getting more beautiful. Peace.